For many Spider-Man fans all around the world, February 2015 was a very memorable time. The announcement is finally made public. Sony Pictures Entertainment brings Marvel Studios into the amazing world of Spider-Man. The internet celebrates a bittersweet victory, the start of a hopeful new era for Spider-Man, albeit without Andrew Garfield. June 2015, Tom Holland is announced as the brand new Peter Parker, making his debut in Captain America: Civil War. And so the wait begins. What's in store for this new Spider-Man? How will he live up to Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire? And, oh god, how will the suit look? Can anything compare to the greatness we've already witnessed from the Raimi trilogy and the Amazing Spider-Man 2's incredibly faithful threads? Speculation was rampant. Fans were claiming they'd caught a glimpse at the Spider-Man suit shooting for Civil War, and that we were in for something very different. Images and sketches were shared of what the suit would look like. The first trailer for Captain America: Civil War dropped without any appearance of Spider-Man at all. The film looms nearer and nearer until March 10th, just a little under 2 months ahead of the film's release, Trailer 2 drops, and at the very end of the trailer, he appears. Spider-Man, with Captain America's iconic shield in hand and 2 little words from a youthful voice. Hey everyone. And with that, Spider-Man is welcomed to the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Hey, wait a minute, it's me, Bob, from Bob's Burgers. Why don't you sit down? A YouTube video is a lot like a burger. It takes a bit of effort to grill it and put it together. But the thing is, while you might pay me for a burger, you can watch these videos for free. So all I ask is that you subscribe to the channel. Maybe hit the like button as well, Gene. And if you do want to pay for the video like you would pay for a burger, the link to the Patreon is in the description below. Enjoy the rest of the video, Linda.
So why exactly did fans want Spider-Man in the MCU so badly anyway? Well, there is a curiosity factor. We'd never seen Spider-Man alongside other Marvel superheroes on the big screen before. But it wasn't just about crossovers. Marvel Studios was, at that time, one of the most reliable studios for a quality blockbuster, proving that they could do a great job managing a variety of different types of superhero, from street level to cosmic. Marvel's track record might not have been perfect at this time, but it was certainly more compelling than Sony's. I couldn't think of a better shot to lead with for a first impression with MCU Spidey than what we got at the end of Trailer 2. First of all, there's a clear look at the costume, and we can rest easy, it's classic Spidey. This time, ditching the raised webbing and frills of the previous Hollywood Spidey suits in favor of something flatter and cleaner, with the only departure being black stripes cutting through some of the red sections. But not only was he rocking up in a gorgeously faithful rendition of the suit, his eyes have apertures that can squint, showing that this Spidey was drawing some more inspiration from the source material, complete with emotive eyes. He was also rocking up in a nice classic Spidey pose as he cheekily snatches Captain America's shield and poses with it. This was Spider-Man diving into the scene, yoinking one of the most iconic pieces of Marvel iconography and posing with it, sending Marvel and Spider-Man fans alike into a frenzy. For this new Spider-Man, things were a bit different. He wasn't being introduced in his very own solo movie, but as a supporting cast member in the 3rd film in the Captain America franchise, and at a pivotal point for the MCU, as it was entering its 3rd phase and fracturing its Avengers team. Not only that, this Spider-Man would be skipping the origin story altogether, giving us a pre-established, albeit younger Spider-Man, with Tom Holland being the youngest actor in the role to date. As mentioned in the Spidey Summit before, this Spider-Man was going back to high school, and he'd be staying there for more than just one movie. So, how did Captain America: Civil War do with laying down the groundwork for the Spider-Man of a new generation? It begins with Tony Stark recognizing that his team in the Civil War is a little short with Hulk and Thor off the grid, so he goes to visit a person of interest. The big Civil War location text shows Queens, as we follow Peter Parker returning home from school with a DVD player. But when he gets in, he's met not only by Aunt May, as played by Marisa Tomei, but Tony Stark, as both Peter and Tony knowingly bluff to each other about the Stark Foundation grant. Tony asks for a moment to speak to Peter alone, and the two talk, Tony revealing to Peter that he's been watching him, that he knows that he's Spider-Man. Peter tries everything he can to hide it, but Tony, being a few steps ahead, finds the suit. This scene tells us everything we need to know about Peter. He's clever, he's nailed his algebra test, Tony is impressed with the webbing Peter's developed all by himself. He's also a dumpster diver, he's got an antiquated computer, his DVD player came from a dumpster, he's resourceful. He doesn't use his powers for leisure, believing that he needs to stay true to himself and his original abilities when in public to keep his secret. And his motivation? Responsibility. That given his abilities, if he doesn't act when bad things happen, they are his responsibility. Tom Holland's performance also does a lot to sell that this motivation comes from a place of hurt, as he stutters shortly before revealing his MO to Tony. But it also needs to be said that in this one scene, Tom Holland completely wins me over with his performance as Peter Parker. He comes off as mild-mannered, secretive, a bit awkward, and absolutely sells the boy genius angle. Tony tells him that he needs an upgrade and recruits him for the battle against Captain America, and uses Aunt May and his secret identity as leverage against him. Peter is 15 in this film, and there's something pretty ugly about Tony dragging a kid who has minimal understanding of the Sokovia Accords into the battle with Captain America. But what's cool about Peter's role in all this is, again, he has nothing to do with this film's internal conflict. Every reason he has to battle Captain America is told to him by Iron Man. This film represents a dark place for Iron Man. In Civil War, everyone has their own emotional stake in the battle, their own personal conflicts, except for Spider-Man. He has nothing to do with it, which means while, yes, he is fighting in the fight, he's also pretty friendly and jovial with the people he's fighting against, which means we get a lot of quips and even some friendlier interactions between him and Cap, despite them being on opposing sides. What I especially love about this scene, though, is that Spider-Man's full might is on display here, as he makes quick work of both the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. The Winter Soldier has shown to be, over the course of the first half of Civil War and Captain America the Winter Soldier, a force to be reckoned with. His arm virtually unstoppable, yet Spider-Man is able to catch his punch and make a joke back to him. Spidey's always a few steps ahead, and he's able to use his brains to take down Giant Man. While he has nothing to do with the overall conflict, this scene belongs to Spidey. He steals the show, and he makes his debut holding his own against some of the MCU's most powerful heroes. We then see Spider-Man again in the after credits as he discovers the spider signal in his web shooters, hinting at more never-before-seen on-screen classic Spidey features coming in the near future, before the text reads, "Spider-Man will return." Goosebumps. What an incredible debut for the MCU Spider-Man. Captain America Civil War remains one of the strongest MCU entries to date, bringing the MCU two new incredible heroes in Black Panther and Spider-Man, both of which made lasting impressions. Spider-Man gets around 20 minutes of screen time in this film, and every moment of that is spent establishing this new Spider-Man, from the power and jovial nature of the Spider-Man persona to Peter and the weight on his shoulders. Nothing of the origin story is explicitly stated. There's no outright mentions of the spider that bit him or Uncle Ben. It's more or less left to our imagination there. But what we do know is who Spider-Man is and what he's all about 6 months into his vigilante career. Then in 2017, we get the very first Sony and Marvel collaboration with Spider-Man Homecoming, and it's clear that Sony are making the most of the new toys they have to play with thanks to Spider-Man's place in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Front and center in the marketing of Spider-Man Homecoming was that Spider-Man would be teaming up with Iron Man for this one. Seriously, you are hard-pressed to find a poster for this film that doesn't feature Iron Man. He was all over the marketing for this film. If Raimi's Spider-Man trilogy represents the Ditko and Romita eras of Spider-Man, and Mark Webb's Amazing Spider-Man movies represent the Ultimate Spider-Man, then the first MCU Spider-Man film was being marketed as a Marvel team-up. Looking at the marketing of the previous Spider-Man movies, we had Going for the Ultimate Spin with Spider-Man 1, Choice and Destiny for Spider-Man 2, An Internal Struggle with Spider-Man 3, An Untold Story with The Amazing Spider-Man, and The Ultimate Battle with a Barrage of Enemies for The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Yet at the center of Spider-Man Homecoming's marketing was, this one is in the MCU. which I guess I get for brand recognition, but for Spider-Man's first standalone movie in the MCU, a fully blown team-up with Iron Man wasn't really what I'd hoped would be on the cards. The marketing for this film, in spite of a very strong first trailer, was just, hey, look, remember the MCU stuff? Avengers Tower, Iron Man. Fortunately, that wasn't the case though, as what we got was a Spider-Man movie that basically had some expanded cameos from Iron Man. And as a Spider-Man movie, Spider-Man Homecoming was perhaps the best reboot we could have asked for this time. This film lightens the load significantly. Both the Sam Raimi and Mark Webb series tied their stories, even their sequels, closely with Spider-Man's origins. They were very introspective films, and there's definitely a place for that. As I say, I love the Raimi trilogy, I love the first Amazing Spider-Man. These are quintessentially Spidey stories, but there have been hundreds of Spider-Man stories throughout the ages, with not all of them hinging on Peter's origins, not all of them featuring callbacks to Peter's past. Spider-Man Homecoming is all about looking to a bright future for a new hero. Like the previous two Peters, Tom Holland's Peter has wants and goals. Tobey's Peter wanted to be with Mary Jane Watson, Andrew's Peter wanted to understand the grief of his parents abandoning him, and this Peter wants to score a date with Liz Allen. However, a major difference this time is that Spider-Man also gets a long-term goal. And much of the dichotomy between Peter and Spider-Man comes in the conflicts of those goals. Spider-Man wants to be an Avenger. Like the Amazing Spider-Man though, there's a distinct difference between what Peter wants and what he needs. His desires at the start of the film compared to his desires at the end of the film. Peter has also been completely reinvented. He's not a friendless loner or a guy with the baggage of a best friend who low-key despises him. He's surrounded by a small group of students who would all be happy to have him as a part of the academic triathlon team, while he's ultimately still a bit of an awkward goof. He has struggles socializing, but they're kind of just all on him this time. We've got a new MJ too, but she's not Mary Jane. She's Michelle Jones, a smart, snarky loner with a dark sense of humor, as played by Zendaya. But she's not Peter's love interest in this film, as he hasn't really gotten much of a chance to get to know her yet. This Peter, as of this film, has a sense of puppy love for the smart, vibrant Liz Allen, played by Laura Harrier. While this film is in the high school setting, you don't really have the bullies and the jocks like you'd see in Spider-Man 1 and The Amazing Spider-Man. This Peter attends more of a science-specific school and is surrounded by his fellow geeks, including his best friend Ned Leeds, played by Jacob Batalon. We've also got to talk about Flash Thompson, played by Tony Revolori. As I said, no bullies, no jocks. Flash Thompson is an obnoxious, wealthy kid. He's the guy to host the parties, and he views Peter as an easy target for pranks and remarks. A justification for this was that he's a bit more relevant to the youth culture of today. I honestly appreciate that this version of Flash is more of a rival to Peter, someone who is almost as smart as Peter but overcompensates with money and just being outright obnoxious. And yeah, that's quite a far cry from classic Flash, but the supporting cast of this film are a total reinvention through and through, even down to Aunt May, played by Marisa Tomei, less a doting old aunt, more of a mother to Peter. Now I'll be real, I can understand why these changes may be alienating, but to me, different doesn't have to mean bad. Again, it's a total reinvention, but it all feels very much in the spirit of a young Spider-Man story. But absolutely makes sense for the story they're trying to tell here. It's very much a modernization of the early Spider-Man run, taking influence from the Ultimate Comics, particularly when Miles Morales came into play, as Ned Leeds very closely mirrors Miles' best friend Ganke Lee. Ned finds out very early into the film that Peter is Spider-Man, and the audience can relate in that this is one of the most exciting things that has ever happened to Ned. But, like with Peter and Gwen in the Amazing Spider-Man films, Peter and Ned are really a team here, as Ned acts as Peter's guy in the chair, except this time, the love interest remains divorced from Peter's life as Spider-Man, as Liz Allen has no knowledge of his secret. Now, that's going to be important to the Peter Parker Spider-Man conflict, but a bit more on that later. What's so great about Spider-Man Homecoming, in the context of the bigger picture of the MCU, is that we actually get to see the ordinary people that inhabit the world of the MCU, which is something we rarely see. You got Iron Man, he's a billionaire. Captain America, he's a war veteran from the past, a super soldier. These aren't really people who live in the real world as such. They don't live normal lives the way Peter Parker does. So when New York is under fire, with Spider-Man Homecoming, we actually get to know some of the people that inhabit that city. A departure from the previous Spider-Man films is that those previous films tend to focus more on Peter Parker, which is to be expected when their stories stay closer to the origins of the character, while Spider-Man Homecoming is much more focused on Spider-Man. A criticism that I had of Amazing Spider-Man 2 was that Peter didn't spend enough of the film in costume as Spider-Man. The film felt very distracted from the hero that we all bought tickets to see. Spider-Man Homecoming completely fixes this and then some, as this is probably the most Spidey-centric live-action film to date. There's a lot less reluctance from Peter towards being Spider-Man in Spider-Man Homecoming. This Spider-Man is always seeking to act, he's always ready to suit up and save the day, but he's under the surveillance of Tony Stark and Happy Hogan. There are other authorities he has to answer to this time, and certain operations he's ready to suit up for are already covered by people who are paid to deal with it. It's quite meta in the sense that Spider-Man has never existed in a universe like this before, and now he kinda needs to adapt. It's another major factor at play here. It's the backdrop of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We've never had a Spider-Man share superhero status before. He's always been the one and only superhero that we know of in his universe. So it calls the question, in a universe full of superheroes, what kind of superhero is Spider-Man? And that's something Peter has to learn over the course of the film. Something previous Peters haven't really even had to consider. Picking up after the events of Captain America Civil War, Tony allows Peter to keep the newly teched out Spider-Man costume that he used in Germany, and Peter is just constantly waiting for the next mission, the next phone call, while in the meantime he looks for things to do as Spider-Man in Queens. Like a kid entering their dream job though, it quickly becomes clear that operating under Tony Stark isn't really all that, as he spends most of his time, again, waiting for phone calls. And then when he pursues his own missions, he gets told by Iron Man himself that he should have just stayed put. Peter longs for a sense of independence as he rebels against Iron Man and constantly takes matters into his own hands, only to be scolded for it by one of his idols. So the dynamic between Spider-Man and Iron Man is often a bone of contention among Spider-Man fans. Personally, I don't really have any issue with it. Peter doesn't exactly do as he's told, often acting against Iron Man's wishes. It's a big component in this film. Iron Man constantly underestimates Peter, viewing him as just someone to help old ladies cross the street, telling him Captain America could have easily laid him out if he wanted to, calling the FBI on him when he went to take down the criminals on the Staten Island ferry. Peter also underestimates himself though, as he begins to rely on the technical functions of his new suit instead of his intuitions. So, let me back up a bit. Spider-Man foils a bank robbery and notices that the robbers have incredibly unique, advanced technology. So he investigates. He wants to go to Flash Thompson's party and make an impression alongside Ned. Peter claims he's friends with Spider-Man, and Flash pressures Peter into bringing Spider-Man to the party. So Peter suits up, and just as he's ready to go and claim peak social status, he witnesses an explosion in the distance and gives chase, only to stumble his way into an alien weaponry deal. So, let's quickly talk about the villains of this film. Adrian Toomes, played by Michael Keaton, runs a cleanup operation, and after the events of the Avengers, he and his team are ready to clean up the damage left by the Chitauri invasion attempt, but they're run out of business by Tony Stark's damage control organization. So, they become criminal scavengers, taking what they can from the aftermath of devastating events in the MCU to sell them as weapons. Adrian Toomes creates flight gear for himself and becomes the Vulture. Montana, this time, isn't a member of the Enforcers, but is instead the first incarnation of the Shocker, alongside Herman Schultz, who would succeed him after his death. And there's also the Tinkerer, who combines the alien tech with human tech to create the weapons. Two of their clients are Aaron Davis and Matt Gargan, who are yet to become the Prowler and Scorpion respectively, but... Whoa, wait a minute. How many villains does that total if we include villains that aren't quite villains yet? That's 6 Spider-Man villain characters being adapted here. Sinister Six much? Whoa! Nah, but the film's main villain is really Vulture. He's the head of the entire operation. Now, after being rescued from the clutches of the Vulture, Iron Man tells Spider-Man not to interfere and that this will be dealt with, just not by him. Spider-Man finds a leftover piece of alien weaponry after the chase and decides to study it at school with Ned. However, it sets off a pulse which leads the two Shockers to Midtown High. Peter places a tracker on them and investigates their operation and how he can shut it down, and so he does everything in his power to do so. He has Ned hack his new Spider-Man tech suit to remove the restrictions, and he sets out to Washington, D.C. with his class for the academic triathlon, but that's not what Peter is there for. He's there to take the weapons dealers down at their lair in Maryland. Ned brings the weaponry component with him for safekeeping and investigation. After a scuffle with Vulture, Spider-Man finds himself trapped in the damage control vault, unable to get back to his friends. Back in Washington, D.C., his friends win the academic triathlon without him. Peter misses out on his class's victory and a visit to the Washington Monument. However, the bag scanner at the monument sets off the explosive capabilities of the weapon component in Ned's bag, putting his class in mortal danger. Spider-Man escapes just on time and rescues his classmates, but Peter is in trouble for ditching them and gets detention. See, that's what it's all about. Spider-Man, he gets punished for doing the right thing. That's a very Spider-Man thing. Spidey sets out to interrogate Aaron Davis, completely botches the interrogation, but Aaron tells him there's an operation going on the Staten Island ferry. So Spider-Man swings out to stop Vulture on the ferry. He takes his weapon, webs it to the boat, causing the weapon to overload, splitting the boat in half. Spidey does everything he can to keep it together until Iron Man steps in to put the boat back together successfully. Tony determines that Spider-Man is more of a liability than an asset and withdraws his support, including the suit. Trying to make the best of a bad situation, Peter asks Liz Allen to the homecoming dance, and she says yes. But when he goes to pick her up, we're met with a shocking revelation. She's the Vulture's daughter. Peter accidentally kills the Vulture in front of her, and she becomes the Vulture seeking revenge. I'm just kidding. Toomes gives both Peter and Liz a ride to the dance. Toomes notices that Peter seems familiar, but when Liz jokes about how Peter always disappears, how he disappeared at the party, how he disappeared in DC, Toomes starts to put it all together in an incredibly tense and well-directed scene. Toomes discovers that Peter is Spider-Man. He tells Liz he wants to speak with Peter alone, and he threatens him. He tells him he's willing to let everything slide because he saved his daughter, but if he ever interferes with his business again, he'll kill Peter and everyone he loves. He then sends Peter into the dance. Peter goes to Liz, apologizes to her, and then runs off. He grabs his old suit and webs from beneath his locker and sets out, only to be intercepted by Herman Schultz, the Shocker, before he can even put his web shooters on. The two fight in the school bus parking lot until Peter is rescued by Ned, using Peter's drop web shooter to web Shocker to the side of a bus. It's a really cool scene as well because we're seeing Shocker using his gloves to push buses onto Peter. And I love just little details like Spider-Man getting distracted by the gum on the bottom of the seats. Just a great character moment for Spidey. So Ned goes back to the school library to help Peter track down the Vulture, whose next target is the Stark jet moving resources from the old Avengers Tower to the new base upstate. Spidey borrows Flash Thompson's car to chase after the Vulture. Vulture uses his wings to collapse an entire building onto Spidey and sets out for the jet, but Spidey manages to motivate himself to lift the ruins of the building off of him before webbing onto the Vulture's wings, following him onto the Stark jet. Also, when Ned Leeds is asked why he's not at the dance, he has the funniest excuse. He tells the teacher he's looking at porn, and I cannot think of a funnier answer than that. Just well played, Ned Leeds. Good on you, man. Peter and the Vulture battle in the sky as the Stark jet crashes into Coney Island. Peter tries to tell the Vulture that his wing pack is about to explode, but the Vulture ignores it and is defeated. Spidey webs him up, leaves a note for Happy and the police to find him, and the Vulture is defeated. When Peter goes back to school, Liz Allen reveals that she's moving to Oregon, her dad is going to prison, and she clearly resents Peter for standing her up. Tony then admits to Peter that he was wrong to underestimate him, and offers him a position as an Avenger, complete with his very own Iron Spider suit, but Peter declines, preferring to stay within his lane as a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, operating completely independently. He goes home to find he's been gifted his Stark suit back, minus some of the bells and whistles, and he suits up. only to be caught by Aunt May. And the film ends on the cliffhanger as Aunt May now knows that Peter is Spider-Man. In the mid-credits, we see Toomes in prison alongside Matt Gargan, who asks him if he knows who Spider-Man is. Toomes honors Peter's secret. So that's Spider-Man Homecoming, and there's just so much going for it. For starters, it's an incredibly fresh new direction for the franchise. Free from the baggage of the Spider-Man origin story, there's a lot less drama this time around, but that doesn't mean it's not there at all. When Peter disappears to be Spider-Man, it usually comes with consequences for himself and his friends, be it Ned accidentally bringing a bomb onto the Washington Monument, or him getting detention for failing to attend the triathlon, or missing his shot with Liz Allen, or Aunt May worrying about him disappearing all the time. There's also a great moment where Liz and the gang are all gonna go swimming, but Peter has to go out and be Spider-Man, and there's a moment of him just contemplating. You know that he wishes he were a normal guy so he could just go swimming with those guys, but no, he's got a mission to go on. Yes, this is a very self-motivated Spidey, but it's also a very conflicted one too, in a very subtle way. The consequences of being Spider-Man are a little smaller than they were in previous Spider-Man films though, but they're the kind of consequences that fit a story emphasizing a younger Spider-Man. He's the kid superhero of the MCU, so when he misses school obligations to be Spider-Man rather than death and destruction, the consequences are more just a month's detention, and I'm completely okay with that. Another contributing factor to this film being as refreshing as it is that it feels more like a genre movie. It's a John Hughes adjacent Spider-Man comedy. The high school stuff is all very quirky and comedic, and his classmates are given more focus than ever before, but that bleeds into the action too. Now, okay, if you're used to the action of the previous films, what we have here is a step down for definite. Spider-Man Homecoming does not pride itself on its action in spite of being much more Spidey-centric. It's the smallest scale Spidey film to date. There aren't many majorly kinetic battles, nor is there any devoted web-swinging scene either. Because Spider-Man doesn't actually go to Manhattan in this one. He doesn't go to the big city. He sticks mostly to Queens and spends a little time in Washington, D.C. Which means we get things like Spider-Man not swinging into the final battle. He instead drives there in Flash's car, which he doesn't know how to drive. He confronts his fear of heights for the first time atop the Washington Monument. The first major action sequence is all in a closed bank, but I think a great scene that really summarizes what this movie's all about is the scene of him chasing down the Shockers through Queens in their van. He tries to shoot a web in a football pitch, but there's nothing to swing from. So we get this action sequence of him just charging through residential areas, knocking down fences, falling into backyards, etc. This film keeps it smaller, and even just makes a joke about how impractical these residential areas are for someone with Spidey's abilities. Because of this film does not rely on the web swinging for thrills. We get other inventive ways to showcase Peter's powers, such as him walking on his own web tightrope in the opening montage, and testing all the different functions of the new suit in the damage control locker. So, this new tech suit, it might sound very Iron Man, but it's really a means of showcasing some of Spidey's wackier abilities from the comics without too many questions about practicality. The different ways he can shoot webs with these new augmented web shooters, taser webs, web grenades, and my favorite function of all, the web wings, which serve a gliding function and are inspired by the earliest years of Spidey. This film is full of Easter eggs to Spidey's past, including the different functions of his new suit, but also, you got Aaron Davis mentioning that he has a nephew, hinting at a potential Miles Morales in the future of the MCU. There's a scene where Spidey lifts the building off of himself, referencing the "if this be my destiny" moment from the Ditko era, the reflection of his face and his mask in the puddle, paying homage to the classic Spidey sense imagery. Spider-Man Homecoming may represent quite a major departure from the source material in terms of things like characterization, but it's full of visual references for longtime fans to appreciate. There are also tons of nods to the MCU as well, as Sony are clearly having a lot of fun with the MCU toy box. Not only does Iron Man appear, but so does Captain America in a series of school PSA videos, including one of the funniest after credits in the MCU, a PSA about unrewarded patience from Captain America. That's genius, and the groans in the audience were just perfect. Spider-Man Homecoming, yeah, it is a far cry from the source material in various aspects. Peter Parker is a far more socially adjusted person than he's usually portrayed as in his teen years. He's not rife with emotional baggage, he's a normal kid. He has his friends, he has his frustrations, he has his idols. Tony Stark being an idol to Peter also makes a lot of sense. Peter is a technical whiz and a would-be superhero, and Iron Man does serve as a form of authority in the MCU. Iron Man is someone that Peter Parker would naturally idolize in this universe. But it all feeds into the film's main theme, which is underestimation. Tony Stark underestimates Peter when he tells him not to act, when he tells him to just rescue kittens from trees and stay close to the ground. Peter underestimates himself when he relies too much on his suit and loses track of his true power. Toomes underestimates Peter when he tells him to stay out of his way. Peter, Toomes, and Ned all underestimate the power of the tech and weapons that they're dealing with. Toomes underestimates the weapon he accidentally kills the first Shocker with. Peter underestimates Aunt May, believing she isn't noticing what he's doing. With all this being said, for as refreshing, well-paced, and entertaining as Spider-Man Homecoming is, it isn't perfect. Part of what makes Toomes such a compelling villain is that you can relate to his situation. He's been ousted out of his profession by a corporate monopoly, and so he's doing what he can to keep his family living well, even if it means breaking the law. He's willing to kill for the ones he loves. And we see, when he first meets Peter before the homecoming dance, that he's actually a pretty good dad to Liz, that he's nice to Peter before he realizes that he's Spider-Man. What I think undercuts this a little, though, is that Peter's view of Iron Man doesn't really visibly change much in this film. Yes, by the end, he does reject Tony's supervision, his offer to join the Avengers, his mentorship. He decides to be his own Spider-Man, but I feel like it would be even better if we saw him sympathize with Toomes a little more and reflect on Tony a bit differently because of it. Toomes is just a blue-collar worker driven to crime by Tony monopolizing his job. Surely Spidey could acknowledge that, all while still stopping him, of course. I feel like this film would have been even better if that was part of why Peter rejected Tony in the end. I'm also not fond of the whole running gag about how hot Aunt May is. Delmar, the bodega owner, jokes about it, Tony jokes about it, the guys at the restaurant joke about it. I really just don't get what they're trying to achieve here with the whole MILF aspect. Comes across as a means of objectifying a character that is legitimately really important to Peter Parker. Also, some of the CGI can be a tad ropey in places too, with CGI doubles for Spidey at times when they're just not even necessary. Like this here, you mean to tell me that they couldn't just green screen a shot here? Guy looks like he stepped out of Web of Shadows. That said, the CGI doubles weren't nearly as present or egregious as I remembered them being upon rewatch. Spidey does spend the majority of this film in a practical suit, and it looks gorgeous. Even better than it did in Captain America Civil War, where it was entirely mocap. Also, during the final battle, Spider-Man and Vulture, they land on the beach near Coney Island. You can see it in the background. How cool would it have been to have seen Peter and Vulture fight over Coney Island? Maybe use Coney Island, maybe have them fight on a roller coaster or something. That would have been really cool, right? That's a missed opportunity. It's one of those things where if I didn't see Coney Island off in the distance and they just landed on a beach, it would have been fine, but you're showing me Coney Island in a Spider-Man movie. Come on, that's ripe with potential. But I suppose wanting to make use of an entire geography is much more of a Raimi thing, and we gotta accept these directors for who they are. I'll talk a little more about Jon Watts as a director later. To be honest though, that's about all I have to say negatively about the film, just those 4 little things, and other than that, Spider-Man Homecoming is damn good. It's full of plucky spirit and a nice small-scale standalone adventure in the MCU. Jon Watts does a great job directing. He really captures that John Hughesy charm while also doing a great job with building tension. The scenes where Toomes is revealed as Liz's father and the Washington Monument scene are just masterclasses in tension. This film does not rely on the usual Spidey tropes, and Jon Watts gets incredibly creative with the character of Spider-Man. I will say this, 3 incarnations in and the villains are still finding out Spidey's true identity every movie? Yeah, that was a bit disappointing, but the way it's handled here is absolutely worth it. Again, Jon Watts is excellent at building tension. I also really like the look of this film visually. It feels more grounded while still having a nice, colorful Spidey look. It looks like a classic Spider-Man comic. And the soundtrack too, we're on like theme music number 4 for live-action Spider-Man. Yet Michael Giacchino still managed to make something that is unique and memorable enough to hum off the top of your head. On a whole, Spider-Man Homecoming is just brilliant. It's Spider-Man and his world reconstructed for the modern age. It feels homegrown to the MCU. I can understand why the changes of certain characters like MJ now being Michelle, or Flash Thompson, or the introduction of Ned Leeds as Peter's best friend might feel alienating to longtime Spidey fans, but everything here works really well within the context of this movie and this universe, and it doesn't, to me anyway, feel conflicted with the fundamentals of who Spider-Man and Peter Parker are. It's a film that's able to take Spider-Man on his own terms and make something new with it. And I think that's the thing, on its own terms, this film is fantastic, but even I, being a long-term Spider-Man fan, still find a lot to love here. Entering reboot number 2, Spider-Man Homecoming could have easily played it safe, but what we got in the end was incredibly refreshing, and the film was received really well for it. Spider-Man Homecoming was the perfect palate cleanser after The Amazing Spider-Man 2. I can't help but be curious as to what we might have gotten if Andrew Garfield had continued on as Spider-Man, but Tom Holland is more than a worthy successor, and so Spider-Man is off to a flying start in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Before we talk about his next adventures with Avengers Infinity War and Spider-Man Far From Home, we're taking a little detour as we see what Sony are getting up to with an animated Spidey adventure in Into the Spider-Verse. So don't count them out just yet. That will be the next episode. I'll see you there. The good news for you is, if you want your name in the credits of my videos, you can do so for as little as $1 a month over on Patreon. That's less than the price of a cup of coffee per month, and you get a little extra bonus content, and it helps me out at a time when I could really use it. In fact, right now I'm going to give an extra special shout out to the patrons in the $10 or above tier. Their names are Gail Bennett, The Jordo, Kenke, Legendary Ray Ray, Dr. SP here with your PSA for the week. Do something nice for your mother or other maternal figure. Sergio, Cyrus the Skeptic. I love the Boss Baby movies. I'm the biggest fan. I've got the hiccups now. I always give myself the hiccups doing that. I can't do that forever, I swear. Gotta make it special for those $10 ones. Now the $5 crew. We got Broski, SSS06, Dazzle Fizzle, and Council of Geeks. Hell yeah, you guys ain't kidding. Alright, well, thank you everyone for watching. Again, if you like this video, you want to see more like it, be sure to hit subscribe, hit the like button, leave a comment below, let's have a little chat about it, and I'll see you down there, I guess. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Have a great day.